My name is Elena Harper, 34, and last night, I realized silence doesn't protect you. It erases you. I was sitting in the same armchair where my dad used to read the paper every Sunday. The room still smelled like pot roast and passive aggression. Across from me, Savannah stood with her arms crossed, mascara smudged, voice sugar-coated with venom. "You're really not going to say anything, Elena?" she asked, loud enough for Janice to chime in with her usual backhanded concern. In that moment, staring at the family portrait where I was half hidden behind a curtain, I understood something. The real theft wasn't just my curriculum, it was years of being edited out of my own life, and what they didn't know was that in a shoebox upstairs sat the one document that could unravel everything they'd built on my work. Before I tell you how I went from quiet disappointment to the woman sending them a cease and desist letter, take a second to subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because trust me, you're going to want to see how this one unfolds. Grandma once said, "One day, your absence will speak louder than any noise." Maybe I should have believed her then, but I didn't. Not until tonight. The room was still thick with the scent of leftover pot roast and something unspoken, bitter, stale, and impossible to clean. I sat in the armchair by the bookshelf, the one with the fabric worn down at the armrest from decades of my father's quiet presence. Now, only silence lived there, and me, clinging to it, like it could shield me from the gathering storm across the living room. Savannah's voice sliced through the quiet first. "So you're really not going to say anything, Elena?" Her tone was acid-sweet, like she was offering me poison sugar. "After everything I've done to help you?" I looked up slowly. Her mascara had smudged slightly, not from tears. Savannah didn't cry, but from the sheer drama of her expressions. "What do you want me to say?" I asked, measured. Not cold, not warm, just tired. Janice, seated with her ankles crossed like she was in a church pew, chimed in before Savannah could fire again. "She just wants to do well, Elena. You're always so guarded, so—" Her lips pressed together like she was choosing the most polite insult. "Oppositional." I blinked. Once. Savannah laughed, the cruel kind. "Oppositional? She gave me a whole USB with her curriculum on it, and now she's mad I actually used it?" "It wasn't finished," I said quietly. "It was a gift. For your feedback. Not to help me build something," Savannah snapped. "You think you're the only one who cares about kids learning about our roots?" I stared at the family portrait above the fireplace, Dad holding Savannah as a baby, Mom looking regal, and me, almost cropped out by a floral curtain. I'd never noticed that before. "Family roots learning was supposed to be collaborative," I murmured. "I told you that last year. You never responded to the email." Savannah stood now, hands planted on her hips. "Oh, so now I need your permission to honor our heritage? This is what I mean, Mom. She hoards everything. Then when someone tries to move forward, she gets bitter." "She has a point," Janice added, like this was a PTA meeting and I was a delinquent child. "Savannah has drive, passion. You're too—" She trailed off. "Quiet?" I supplied. Janice's lips tightened again. That meant yes. I stood. I didn't raise my voice, didn't break a single dish. I just picked up my coat from the arm of the chair and slipped it on. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. "Where are you going?" Janice asked sharply, as if my silence was a breach of etiquette. I smiled, or tried to. "You already built the program without me. There's nothing left to talk about." Savannah rolled her eyes. "Fine. I'll copyright it. Family Roots Learning. That name's got weight. Already pitched it to Dr. Connolly. He's interested." Janice nodded like a royal giving her blessing. That's a good move, Savannah. No one noticed the way I paused at the door, hand resting on the frame like it anchored me to something solid. No one thanked me for paying the electric bill last month, or replacing the roof last winter, or for the USB I gave Savannah on her birthday last year, wrapped in soft gold ribbon with a note. Hope this helps us start something meaningful together. I closed the door behind me without slamming it. That would have been too loud, and they liked it better when I was quiet. The morning sun had barely cracked the blinds in my apartment when I saw the phone screen. 14 missed calls from Mom. Not a single apology. They say the past can't hurt you, unless your past has a copy of your intellectual property. The clatter of spoons against ceramic cups filled the community cafe, but I barely registered it. My laptop glowed softly in front of me, screen open to a folder labeled Roots Prototype. It hadn't been touched in months, maybe because part of me believed, foolishly, that silence would be enough. That being the bigger person meant letting things go. But now Savannah had turned my silence into a weapon. "You're not drinking your coffee," Marissa said gently, sliding into the chair across from me. Her braids were tied back today, a pencil tucked behind her ear like always. I looked down. The foam heart in the latte had melted into shapelessness. "Didn't feel right," I mumbled. She glanced at the screen. "You reopened it." "I had to." I clicked through the folders. Outlines, assessment modules, pilot survey reports. All written with care. All tagged with timestamps, some dating back 3 years. "Do you remember when I stayed up till 2 a.m. trying to code the feedback loop?" I asked. Marissa smiled. "You called me at midnight crying over line 117. "Exactly." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "So tell me again. Why is she getting the funding?" I didn't answer. Instead, I opened another folder labeled Visual Concepts. Savannah's voice from the night before rang in my head. "Already pitched it to Dr. Connolly." Bile rose in my throat. I opened my inbox. Subject: Similar proposal received. Clarification needed from info@nexus.org. Date: 7:02 a.m. Dear Ms. Harper, thank you for submitting your proposal for the Family Roots Learning Initiative. We noticed several similarities with another proposal we received, titled Root Rise, submitted by a Savannah Harper. Could you please clarify your current affiliation and ownership status of this intellectual property? Sincerely, Kendra Sloan Nexus Ed Foundation. My lungs tightened. She renamed it Root Rise, I said aloud. Marissa leaned forward. "You're kidding." I turned the laptop toward her. She scanned the email and let out a slow, whistling breath. "She's got guts. And audacity." She took the outline. The name's different, but the structure is the same. Even the timeline is nearly identical. She just added graphics. Marissa shook her head. "That's theft." "Legally?" I asked. She shrugged. "Morally? Absolutely. Legally?" She paused. "Do you have any proof of ownership?" I hesitated, then nodded. "There's a handwritten draft. First version of the curriculum, dated and signed. Grandma witnessed it. I used to keep it in a shoebox under my bed, but it's still at your mom's," she finished. I nodded again. "And I'm pretty sure they moved the guest room last year. God knows where they put my things." "You think Savannah knows that's your only physical proof?" She never cared about the paperwork side of things. She thought everything was digital. Marissa leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. "You need that copy. Fast. Before she tries to get the copyright herself." "I emailed Nexus Ed already," I said. "Told them I'd submit documentation within 48 hours. "Good. But Elena," her voice softened, "this could get ugly. Especially if she's already networking with donors and institutions." "I know." A silence stretched between us. The cafe buzzed around us. Orders called out. Chairs dragged. Spoons clinked, but my world felt frozen. Then, quietly, I asked, "If I sue her, will I stand?" Marissa didn't blink. Not alone, but not no. In families like mine, loyalty isn't expected, it's extracted, then weaponized. The rain tapped lightly on the windows of my apartment, a metronome to my isolation. I sat cross-legged on the worn couch, the glow of my phone screen the only light in the room. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was stifling, like wool pressed to my mouth. I hadn't left the apartment since Monday. Not out of fear. Just, what was the point? A buzz. Message from Marissa. Photo received. I tapped. There she was, Savannah, dressed in a deep emerald dress, smiling like a first lady, holding a bouquet of lilies and wrapped in praise. Behind her, Janice clapped with a proud, practiced grace, the restaurant's chandeliers glittering like spotlights. Mom's birthday dinner. I hadn't been invited. Marissa followed with a second message. She's giving a speech. Said it's all from the heart. Want the clip? Before I could answer, she sent it. Savannah's voice, now polished with media coaching, rang through the speakers. This program came to me when I saw how disconnected children were from their roots. I knew I had to create something that would bring them back to who they are. The camera panned to Janice, who nodded solemnly, hand over heart. Behind them was a projection slide titled Root Rise, Culturally Responsive Learning. I paused the video, rewound 5 seconds, played again. This program came to me. I mouthed the words with her. I had written that phrase 2 years ago in a draft called Vision Statement V4.xcx. I still remembered because I struggled for hours to get it just right. The irony stung deeper than the betrayal. It wasn't just that she'd stolen it. She believed it was hers. I leaned back, let my head hit the wall, and closed my eyes. In my memory, I saw myself backstage 3 summers ago. Savannah was being honored by the city's youth council for her mentorship. I had been there, not in the photos, but behind the scenes, holding the clipboard, fixing her mic, adjusting the soundboard she didn't know how to use. I even fed her lines from the cue cards. Not once did she say thank you. A new message from Marissa appeared. Elena, this is out of hand. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I opened Savannah's website. Homepage, Root Rise, Learning from Where We Come From. I scrolled. Our mission: to foster cultural pride and cognitive development in underserved communities through immersive, integrative learning experiences. I blinked. My hand trembled. That wasn't just familiar. It was mine. Nearly word for word from the introduction to the original culturally integrated curriculum I'd authored during grad school. Even the line breaks were identical. I whispered aloud. She didn't even bother to change the formatting. I clicked the footer link. Copyright 2024 Savannah Harper. My breath caught. A sharp knock of fury rose in my chest, but then deflated into a strange, brittle calm. Like watching your favorite mug fall in slow motion and realizing there's no point diving for it. Another message. Marissa, have you thought about suing, or do you need more people? I stared at the text for a long time. It wasn't just about a program anymore. It was about being erased, again and again, until even I started to wonder if I'd ever existed in the first place. They erased me from the credits, but forgot I kept the receipts. The attic smelled like paper and dust, and something more stubborn: memory. I hadn't stepped foot into Grandma's office since the funeral. No one really had. Janice had shut the door and declared, "Let her space be," as though legacy could be preserved by sealing it behind a wooden frame. But silence had already proven useless. Now I needed noise. Legal, tangible, provable noise. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight. each one like a question I should have asked earlier. At the top, I hesitated. The door was half open, the old brass knob cold against my palm. I pushed gently. The light from the single round window pooled across stacks of yellowing books, notebooks with cloth spines, and folders leaning like tired soldiers. Dust motes danced in the sunlight. And right in the center of the room, Grandma's roll-top desk. I made my way over, not daring to sit in her chair. I slid the cover up, and the scent hit me like a whisper. Ink, cedar, and peppermint oil. The first drawer was filled with pens, old receipts, rubber bands turned brittle with time. The second, manuscripts. I paused. Beneath a red folder titled Roots and Branches, Draft. There it was. Family Roots Learning. Phase 1 Curriculum. My name, in cursive. And beneath it, a second signature. Hester M. Harper. Witness. I swallowed. My throat was dry. Carefully, I lifted it out and checked the footer on the page. The date, July 12th, 2021. Savannah's birthday had been 8 months later. They always said I was paranoid, that I kept too many drafts, too many backups. But this was why. I opened the red folder. Inside were sketches for the module layouts, community questionnaires, even a printed grant pitch that never got sent. I remembered showing it to Grandma one night while she sipped chamomile tea, her hand warm and steady on mine as I read it aloud. Then I saw it, tucked in the back corner of the drawer. A small, pale blue envelope. No postage, just my name, Elena. The paper was folded once, the edges curled. Her handwriting was delicate but firm. I sat on the floor and read, the words cracking something inside me with every line. My dear Elena, if you're reading this, then time has made its move. I've watched the way you love ideas, not to hoard, but to give them shape and meaning. That is not common. The world will praise loud voices, but it is the ones who listen that change it. This project, this calling, belongs to you. Not because you started it, but because you understand it. You are the only one who sees its soul. Protect it, even if it costs you comfort. You were not made to vanish. Let them know that. Grandma tears blurred the ink for a second. I folded the letter back with shaking fingers, then slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat. At the bottom of the drawer, a worn USB drive. Label, Roots, 0.1 backup. I slid it into my laptop and waited. Modified. July 15th, 2021. User, E. Harper. I opened the file. The intro line stared back at me like an old friend. To teach a child where they come from is to free them from where others put them. No version of Savannah's presentation had that. I packed everything. The manuscript, the USB, the letter, into my satchel like evidence for a trial. Because maybe it would be. When I got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I dropped the bag on the table, opened my email, and typed, contact@margotavenslaw.com. Subject, intellectual property infringement, urgent inquiry. Then I clicked send. When I knocked on her office door, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reclaiming my name. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon oil and old carpet. It was quiet, almost reverent, as if even the building knew this wasn't about vengeance. I stood outside the frosted glass panel that read, Margot Evans, Attorney at Law, steadying my breath. My palm hovered over the brass handle a second too long. Then I pushed. The door opened with a soft chime. A young assistant with dark curls and efficient eyes looked up from her desk. Ms. Harper? Yes. Elena. Ms. Evans is expecting you. She gestured to a side door. Straight through. I stepped in. The room was neat but lived in. Stacks of annotated case files lined the windowsill. Law journals lay open on the coffee table, and the scent of mint tea lingered faintly in the air. Behind a large oak desk, Margot Evans stood and offered a hand. "Elena Harper," she said warmly. "I remember you." I paused, startled. Her smile curved gently. "Your grandmother tutored me in 8th grade," she continued. "I was failing algebra. She made me sit through entire Saturdays of graphing equations before giving me a single cookie." I smiled for the first time in days. "Sounds like her?" Margot nodded toward the leather chairs across from her. "Please, sit." I placed the satchel on the table between us and began to lay out the contents. The curriculum draft, the handwritten mission statement, the dated USB, and finally, the letter. Her brows arched as she examined each piece carefully, gloves on, pen tapping occasionally against her notepad. "She signed here," I said, pointing to Grandma's signature. "And the file timestamp confirms it predates the alleged appropriation?" "By at least 8 months," I confirmed. She nodded. "That matters." I watched her as she leaned back, lacing her fingers beneath her chin. Her eyes were sharp, calculated, but not unkind. "There's enough here," she said finally. "Grounds for a civil case. Copyright infringement, misappropriation of intellectual property. Possibly an ethical violation if Savannah filed grant applications or public claims using your material." My stomach turned. "And if she already has?" "We'll find out," Margot said. "I have a contact at Nexus Ed." I hesitated. "What are the chances?" "Of winning?" She tilted her head. "Hard to say. Depends how far she's gone. If there's a paper trail, if witnesses talk." She glanced at the letter again, then looked at me. "But I'll tell you this. Your grandmother was the first person who believed I was worth fighting for. If I get to return the favor by defending her legacy, I'll do it. No charge." Something clenched in my chest, then loosened. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. Margot continued. "Before we file, though, there's something I want you to consider." "What's that?" She leaned forward. "You could give them a chance to withdraw. Privately. No press, no courtroom. Just a formal request to take the site down, return the grant, issue a statement." I blinked. "You mean, offer them dignity?" She shrugged. "It's not dignity they've earned, but it's a door you can choose to open or close." The thought of Savannah, smug and smiling at my mother's birthday dinner, boiled beneath my ribs. But deeper still was Grandma's voice. "Protect it, even if it costs you comfort." "And if they refuse?" I asked quietly. Margot didn't flinch. She met my gaze squarely. "Then let's begin." They built a stage for my sister. I was busy building a case. The elevator let out a mechanical sigh as it reached the 3rd floor of the university library, a place that still smelled of dust, old syllabi, and over-caffeinated regrets. I hadn't been here since graduation, but everything was exactly as I remembered. Amber lighting filtering through tall, arched windows, floorboards that creaked just enough to make you feel watched, and rows of study booths carved with initials that no janitor bothered to scrub away. I took a deep breath, adjusted my bag, and stepped into the archives wing. Margot's voice echoed in my mind. "If they deny it, we need insider testimony. Someone who saw the chain of custody break." I wasn't sure Natalie would even show. The desk clerk, a woman in her 60s with cat-eye glasses and a proud librarian pin, barely glanced up when I asked for the access logs to the Roots mapping project. "FERPA rules," she muttered. "Nothing private leaves this desk." "I'm not asking for student grades," I replied calmly. "Just timestamp logs on shared software use. That's university property." She tapped her nails on the desk, studying me. "Harper? Elena?" She disappeared for a few minutes, then returned holding a slim folder. "You'll have to look at it here. See." I flipped it open. Line after line of time-stamped entries, my ID number, my university email. Each entry tied to Roots Mapping, a visualization tool I'd customized for the Family Roots Learning Program. One entry caught my eye, March 4th, 2022, 2 months after I'd stopped using the tool. It bore my username, but I hadn't logged in that day. My fingers clenched around the edge of the paper. Elena? I turned. Natalie stood just past the first bookshelf, wrapped in a brown coat too big for her and a look that wavered between guilt and defiance. "Thanks for coming," I said, unsure how much gratitude I owed her yet. She shrugged. Curiosity got the better of me, and it's not like I have anything to lose. We sat at a side table beneath a brass lamp. I handed her a printed copy of the log. She read in silence. "She used your ID," she said finally. "More than once. You saw her. Twice in the lab. She said you gave permission, but it never felt right. Especially since she changed the login info after that." I exhaled. Something between relief and fury. "I got fired the day after I asked too many questions," Natalie continued. "I was told I'd been disruptive to the team's cohesion." "That sounds like Janice," I muttered. Or Savannah, pretending to be Janice. Natalie reached into her coat pocket. "I still have this." She slid her phone across the table. On screen, an archived email from Savannah dated June 6th, 2022. "Do not mention the origin of the project in public or in funding documents. I'm leading this now. That's final." The words sat on the screen like coals. I didn't speak. Natalie glanced at me. I kept it, just in case she tried to burn me later. Smart. She leaned forward. "Look, I know I didn't stand up when I should have. I was afraid. But you were the one who built it. I saw the drafts. I heard you explain the modules. I'll testify, if you want me to." A lump formed in my throat. Not sorrow. Recognition. Maybe even a flicker of justice. "I was used too," she said. "Except I pulled out sooner than you." I nodded. "That still makes you brave." She stood, zipped her coat, and walked off without ceremony. I stayed behind, scanning the email into a secure folder on my laptop. Then I pulled out my phone and typed quickly. To Margot Evans. Text. "I have a witness." And an email. I didn't wait for a reply. I already knew what it would be. I didn't start the fire, but I brought the match to the gasoline they spilled. Tuesday morning broke with the sound of notification pings, soft, deliberate, like a war drum played with velvet gloves. I sat in my kitchen, laptop open, Margot's draft email on screen. The subject line was as dry as bone, unauthorized use of intellectual property. But the body, it cut like a scalpel. "To whom it may concern, it has come to our attention that the program currently known as Heritage Empowered includes significant portions of content identical in structure, pedagogy, and language to a prior unpublished curriculum titled Family Roots Learning, originally authored by Ms. Elena Harper, with time-stamped documentation, physical manuscripts, and eyewitness accounts. This constitutes a potential violation of copyright law and ethical guidelines regarding grant application integrity." Margot had signed it as counsel. Then she sent it to me for review. I added one line, just beneath her signature. "P.S. I will not be silent again. Elena." We sent it at 8:03 a.m. By 9:14 a.m., Savannah's Facebook post, a polished image of her standing in front of a large conference banner. "Educators for Equity, 2024. With the caption, "Proud to introduce my personal passion project this Friday." Was gone. Deleted. Not hidden. Gone. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat steady. For the first time in weeks, the silence that surrounded me didn't feel suffocating. It felt earned. The phone rang. "Mom." I didn't answer. It rang again. then again. I turned the phone face down and opened my email. There it was. From Savannah Harper. Subject: warning letter. Her message was short. More venom than vocabulary. So you're threatening legal action now? You think anyone cares about old manuscripts and your dusty little software? You gave it to me. You let me shine. Now you're trying to ruin me? No greeting. No apology. Just guilt rewrapped in accusation, like she'd always done. I clicked forward, entered Margot's address. No message in the body. Just changed the subject line. She took the bait. I didn't need revenge. I needed receipts, and I was filing them alphabetically. Savannah adjusted her blazer with the confidence of someone who had always walked into rooms already applauded. The green room of the Georgia Educators Conference buzzed with stylists, interns, coordinators balancing headsets and urgency. Her name was printed on the door in bold serif font. Keynote speaker, Savannah Harper. The projection screen outside displayed her title slide. Heritage Empowered, a Pathway to Cultural Literacy. She smiled at it, half listening as her assistant recited the event timeline. 10 minutes until showtime, 8 until the introduction. The room smelled faintly of lilies and overconfidence. Then the intern burst in. Ms. Harper, there's a situation. Savannah didn't flinch. Define situation. The intern held out a phone. An email glowed on the screen. Subject line: Urgent. Intellectual Property Conflict Notice to the event organizers and sponsorship committee. We are writing to inform you that the forthcoming keynote presentation titled Heritage Empowered appears to contain unlicensed and plagiarized content derived from an unpublished program known as Family Roots Learning, developed by Elena Harper. Documentation, including metadata, eyewitness statements, and time-stamped manuscripts, is available upon request. Proceeding with the current speaker without proper disclosure may subject your institution to legal complications. Respectfully, Margot Evans, attorney at law. Savannah's hands curled into fists at her sides. Where did this come from? She asked tightly. The intern stammered. It's been circulating in the organizer WhatsApp group for the last 30 minutes. The sponsor reps are already asking questions. She moved like a woman wading through molasses as she exited the green room. Beyond the curtain, the audience waited. Rows of folding chairs filled with educators, investors, and community organizers. The podium gleamed under the stage lights, a beacon of expectation. The host took the stage. Our keynote speaker today is someone whose work in culturally responsive education. Her voice trembled. A projector screen blinked. For a second, it displayed Savannah's title slide. Then it glitched. Then came a split screen. One half showing Savannah's Heritage Empowered module, the other a document labeled Family Roots Learning, Draft V2, March 2022, E. Harper. The room rippled. Lines of text mirrored each other word for word, graphics identical. Even the taglines, Sow Culture, Grow Confidence, were a perfect match. Someone whispered, That's plagiarism. Another murmured, Isn't that Elena's? Savannah stepped onto the stage, mic clipped to her collar, smile brittle as glass. Good morning, she began, voice shaking. The sound system picked up every tremor. The moderator interrupted, walking on stage with a clipboard. There was a short, whispered exchange. Savannah's smile collapsed as the mic cut out. The host turned back to the crowd. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be shortening today's keynote. Gasps scattered like confetti. Savannah stood frozen as her moment unraveled in real time, the applause she expected replaced by murmurs of doubt and slow head shakes. Back in my apartment, I watched it all through a shaky phone live stream. Marissa had sent the link 2 minutes earlier. I didn't smile. I just sat with my hands folded, waiting. My phone buzzed. Mom, Elena, what are you doing? You're ruining her. They called me a saboteur, but I was simply pulling back the curtain. The envelope was thick, one of those cream-colored FedEx packages that made your stomach drop before you even broke the seal. It lay on my doorstep like a silent threat. The sender's name was embossed at the corner. Drayton and Beale, LLP, Savannah's new defenders. Inside, 10 pages of legalese, bold headlines that blared like accusations. Cease and desist demand, defamation of character. The letter accused me of orchestrating a campaign of slander, of distributing misleading and damaging content about Savannah's professional credentials, and of maliciously interfering with contractual relationships. I stood there, paper in hand, heart in throat. My name looked strange in print. Elena Harper, the aggressor. Margot sat cross-legged across from me at her office, reading the pages with surgical calm. "This is expected," she said, without looking up. I blinked. She's accusing me of defaming her honor? She's trying to flip the narrative. She can't erase the documents, the email, or the metadata, so she'll try to paint you as the jealous sister digging up dirt. "She's not wrong about that part," I muttered. Margot smirked. "She's wrong about what we'll do with it." Still, I felt the weight of it pressing down. There was something different about seeing her retaliation spelled out in legal jargon, wrapped in polished language that made me sound petty and vindictive. Part of me, a part shaped by years of silence, started to believe it. Maybe I was ruining things. Maybe I was the problem. That night, I sat on my porch, fingers curled around a mug of tea gone cold. The stars above Atlanta blinked like they were tired of watching. A text from Marissa arrived. "You okay?" I didn't answer. Then Natalie texted a video. It wasn't long, maybe 30 seconds. The screen was shaky, taken from an old phone. Savannah sat on a couch, legs crossed, a glass of white wine in hand. She laughed, hair flipping over her shoulder, and said, "My sister didn't do anything. I just took back what was mine. I deserve the spotlight. She's never wanted it anyway." The timestamp read, March 8th, 2023. My hands trembled. Not with fear, with clarity. This wasn't about defamation. It was about truth. Spoken when Savannah thought no one would remember, no one would record, no one would fight back. I forwarded the video to Margot. She replied instantly, "This changes everything." The tape didn't lie, but it made everyone else start to. Margot's office was unusually quiet that afternoon, more sanctuary than strategy room. Sunlight sifted through the blinds, pooling in soft streaks across the oak table where the documents lay. Jazz played low from a speaker in the corner, a saxophone weaving between silences like a breath we hadn't realized we'd been holding. Natalie sat upright, hands folded, eyes clear. "I'll sign it," she said. The legal assistant passed her the affidavit. 2 pages. Simple. Precise. It described Savannah's use of my password, her denial of Elena's authorship, and the quote caught on video, the one she never thought would surface. Natalie signed her name. No hesitation. "I was part of it. That matters," she said, then glanced at me. "But I'm not hiding anymore." I nodded, heart too full for words. She had been in the shadows once, like me, but we weren't shadows anymore. Margot turned her laptop toward us, pulling up the digital timeline she'd crafted. On the left, dated drafts of the Family Roots Learning curriculum, handwritten notes from me and Grandma, screenshots of file metadata, USB timestamps, the email from Savannah telling Natalie to stay quiet. And now, the video. On the right, Savannah's application to the Nexus Ed Foundation, her public statements, the speech at the birthday party, the deleted post. It was like watching a puzzle lock into place. "All right," Margot said. "We've got our line of proof. Authorship, timeline, witness." She opened her email client. I handed her the last thing I'd written. The subject line read, "Final option, withdrawal without repercussions." The body was simple. "Savannah, you have until Friday 5 p.m. to retract public claims and return all funding acquired under the title Heritage Empowered. If you choose silence, we proceed with formal litigation. This is your last off-ramp. Elena Harper." Margot nodded once, hit send. Then she turned to me. "Now we wait. 48 hours." But we both knew what was coming. There was no reply by Friday morning. By noon, the complaint was filed with the Georgia State Intellectual Property Court. By 1 p.m., Margot held a quiet press briefing outside her office. Just 2 journalists, 1 camera, 1 statement. "This case is about authorship, about credit, about truth." No names were slandered, no anger was voiced. But the video leaked within the hour, and the internet, as it always does, started whispering. I stared at my phone. Notifications pulsed like a heartbeat. Then it rang. I hesitated. "Mom." I picked up. Her voice trembled. "Elena, your mother needs to see you." For the first time in years, they had to listen. I wasn't asking anymore. The Atlanta Education Council auditorium buzzed with a low hum, the kind that rises just before a storm breaks. Rows of seats were filled with community educators, reporters, school administrators, and curious neighbors. Some clutched notepads, others smartphones, ready to document what they'd only whispered about until now. I stood in the wings, palms damp, heart steady. Margot adjusted the lapel of my jacket before whispering, "You don't need them to believe you. You just need them to hear you." I stepped into the light. The projector behind me flickered to life with a single slide. Original curriculum draft, March 14th, 2020. My name sat at the bottom in clean font. Under it, Grandma's signature, scanned from the paper she left in the attic. I took a breath. My name is Elena Harper, and 3 years ago I developed the Family Roots Learning Program to serve children whose stories were never in textbooks. A few murmurs. I click the remote. Timeline, email chains, access logs, the photo of the USB with its last edit date, the audio file where Savannah whispered to Natalie, "Don't tell anyone the origin. I'm in charge now." I looked toward the front row. Janice sat stiff, jaw clenched, her purse clutched tight in her lap. She hadn't made eye contact since I entered the room. Next to her, Savannah shifted uncomfortably, arms crossed. She wore a crimson blazer, perfect makeup, and the brittle stillness of someone being watched. I clicked again. Natalie stepped forward to the mic. Her voice didn't shake. "I was a research assistant. I saw Elena build this program. I saw Savannah take credit. I received an email asking me to keep quiet or lose my job. I stayed silent. Until now." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The board chair, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "And you're willing to sign this statement under oath?" "Yes, sir," Natalie replied. I scanned the audience. Some people nodded, others frowned, and a few, those who once dismissed me as the quiet sister, looked like they'd just bitten into something bitter. Then Savannah stood. Her heels clicked like defiance across the floor. She took the second microphone. "My sister," she began, "is confused. She gave me that material as a gift. Years ago. She didn't want to lead. She said it herself. She doesn't have the fire for public work. Lies always come wrapped in soft tones. She's just jealous," Savannah added, her voice rising. "I did the work. I got the recognition. She has nothing but a past." The tension in the room snapped like a violin string. I didn't flinch. Then a woman in a gray blazer, one of the council's younger members, raised her hand. "Ms. Harper," she said, addressing Savannah. If Elena has the copyright, and witnesses confirm her authorship, why is the grant application filed solely under your name? The room went silent. Even Savannah blinked. No answer. Behind me, Margot tapped her tablet and gave me the smallest nod. We were just getting started. They forged my name, but I still had the pen. The morning after the hearing, I was back in Margot's office, running my fingertips along the cold ceramic mug she handed me. The jasmine tea inside barely registered. My mind was elsewhere. On the woman in red heels who'd just lied to a room full of people without blinking. On my mother's frozen face. On the question that changed everything. Why isn't Elena's name on the grant application? Margot was already ahead of me. She paced in front of the tall windows, tablet in hand, scrolling. I pulled the documents last night, she said, and I've already requested a forensic analysis of the signatures. Wait, I said, setting the mug down. You think Savannah forged? I think, Margot interrupted. Someone submitted a version of the grant that was edited after your name was on it. And I think they tried to make it look like you approved it, with your signature. A beat of silence passed. Then she added, "We'll let the experts confirm it." By mid-afternoon, a forensic signature analyst, a calm woman in her 40s with reading glasses and a voice like velvet, sat across from us. She placed two printouts side by side on the glass table. "This," she said, tapping the first sheet, "is a scan of Elena's real signature, dated January 2022. She moved her pen to the second. "This one was digitally lifted, altered slightly in pixel resolution, and embedded using PDF software in March 2023. That's forgery." My stomach dropped, not from surprise, but from validation. The ache of truth being weaponized had long settled in me. Now it had a timestamp. Margot folded her hands. "And the patent filing?" The analyst nodded. "Elena's name was on the first submission, then removed in a later revision. The metadata shows a login under Savannah's email address." Margot looked over at me, her voice cool and razor-sharp. "We're not just talking about family betrayal anymore. This is legal fraud." Later that evening, we sat in a small closed meeting room with a representative from the Georgia Legal Council. He was a wiry man with salt and pepper hair and a lined face that spoke of too many nights parsing through evidence. As Margot laid out the findings, printed reports, timestamps, signature overlays, he scribbled notes with a slow but deliberate hand. When she finished, he looked up. "If this holds under formal review," he said, "the grant process is nullified. The funding will be suspended immediately pending investigation." I didn't smile. I just breathed. "And Savannah Harper?" Margot asked. He didn't hesitate. "Temporarily suspended from any public funding activity, until further notice." It should have felt like a win, but all I felt was tired. That night, as I sat by the window in my apartment, half reading the email confirmation from the council, a soft knock startled me. When I opened the door, Janice stood there, clutching her purse with both hands. Her eyes were red, not freshly, but as if she'd been crying on and off for hours. There was no Savannah behind her, no rehearsed defense. "I shouldn't have come this late," she said softly. I stepped aside without speaking. She sat down slowly, smoothing her skirt, and stared at the floor for a long time before speaking. Her voice was barely audible. "I didn't know," she said. Then she corrected herself. Or maybe, "I didn't want to know." My throat tightened. "I wanted to believe the best of her," Janice continued, her voice cracking. "And you never made noise, Elena. You just did your work. And I let that make you invisible." I didn't interrupt. I let the silence fill the room between us. The same silence I'd grown up inside of, now finally speaking. She looked up at me, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." she whispered. Not just for this. For all the years I didn't see you. I couldn't say I forgave her, but I could say, thank you for saying it. And somehow, that was the first step forward. She built her career on lies. Now the cracks were loud enough for everyone to hear. I watched the screen in silence as Savannah's name scrolled across the bottom of the local news station. The anchor, a woman with perfect hair and a calm, practiced voice, recited the latest development like reading a grocery list. The Georgia Education Board confirmed today that the grant to Ms. Savannah Harper's nonprofit is officially suspended, pending further investigation into claims of forgery, plagiarism, and intellectual property violation. Beside the anchor, a split screen showed footage of the conference stage, Savannah mid-sentence, frozen with wide eyes, the crowd beginning to murmur. Then another clip. Margot standing before microphones, concise and composed. Her statement from the day before had already gone viral. She didn't just take credit, Margot had said. She took authorship, trust, and public resources. That is not ambition. That is theft. Social media wasn't quieter. I scrolled through the trending hashtag, #WhoWroteRoots. Some were angry, some were mocking, but most were simply stunned. Outside Savannah's house, the press had camped out with cameras and umbrellas, waiting for a glimpse of her through the blinds. I could imagine her sitting on the other side, curtains drawn, phone buzzing, trying to silence a world that had turned too loud, too fast. Janice, for once, didn't come to the rescue. She hadn't issued a single statement, hadn't answered a call. She didn't correct the headlines or offer context to the press. She simply stayed quiet. And for Savannah, that silence must have sounded like betrayal. Marissa texted me a screenshot. The board of trustees from the education nonprofit where Savannah had once been keynote speaker had removed her name from their site. Then another. The university where she was set to give a guest lecture had issued a formal postponement. The collapse had begun. But I hadn't expected what came next. At 8:47 p.m., Savannah went live on Instagram. I watched from my laptop, surrounded by a silence that seemed to lean forward. She sat in a dim room, makeup streaked, voice raw. No filters, no lighting tricks. I know what you all think, she began, that I'm some kind of monster, that I took what wasn't mine. Her eyes darted to the screen, watching comments scroll by too fast to read. But you don't know what it's like to be the second daughter, the one who had to shine or disappear. Her breath caught. Elena never needed applause. She just did things. Quietly. Perfectly. And I just wanted to be seen too. There it was. I felt no joy in her unraveling, just a strange, distant ache, like watching a house burn down that you'd once lived in, knowing there was never a fire alarm. Savannah's voice cracked again. Everyone says I'm the golden child, that I was favored. But do they know how many times I heard, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" The screen flooded with hearts. And with questions. Then one comment slowed, froze briefly, pinned to the top of the feed by the algorithm itself. So you're confirming your sister created the show? Savannah's face drained of color. She reached for the screen, and the live stream went black. I didn't win a trophy. I reclaimed my name. The wind was soft that morning, stirring the leaves in lazy circles across the grass. I sat on the weathered bench tucked under the old sycamore tree, the one Grandma and I used to visit on warm afternoons. She'd sit beside me, reading aloud from whatever book I clutched in my lap, her voice a calm anchor in a world that often felt stormy. Today, I was alone, but not empty. In my hands was a folder with the gold-stamped logo of the North Star Education Initiative, an independent nonprofit focused on culturally integrated learning. At the top of the page, just below the header that read, Strategic Content Lead, Community Innovation Program, was my name. Elena Harper. No footnotes, no borrowed gloss, just mine. Marissa appeared with 2 coffees in hand. She didn't say anything as she handed me one, just sat down beside me and let the silence settle like old friends reuniting. I saw the announcement, she said finally. North Star's lucky. I looked over, smiling faintly. I didn't think I'd feel anything, but I do. She hesitated. I need to say something. Maybe selfish? I raised an eyebrow. Marissa sipped her coffee, then turned to face me more fully. I'm sorry for trusting you more than myself. When I didn't reply, she added, I knew the project mattered, but I thought staying out of it meant I wasn't taking sides. But I was just scared. I rested my hand on hers. You stayed when it counted. That was enough. We sat quietly, watching 2 children chase each other near the pond, their laughter high and wild. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Birds chirped in soft, curious patterns. Peace, for once, felt earned. A pair of footsteps approached, cautious, measured. I knew them before I looked up. Janice. Her coat was a little too buttoned, like she didn't know whether to present as mother or supplicant. She stopped a few feet from the bench, eyes darting between me and Marissa, who stood slowly and gave me a nod before walking away. It was just us now. Janice didn't speak at first. Her lips pressed into a thin line, then parted. If you give me a chance, she began, but faltered. I don't know what else to do but stay silent. I let her words hang in the air, words that, months ago, I would have begged to hear. Now, they felt like rain long after the fire had burned out. I don't hate you, I said, but I'm not here to fix us. She lowered her gaze. My silence, I continued, is also a choice, and I have chosen it. Janice nodded once. It wasn't a nod of agreement or understanding. It was resignation. A quiet acceptance that her daughter had walked through the fire and no longer stood waiting for applause. She left without another word. I sat back on the bench, the weight of the folder warm against my lap. I opened it again, flipping to the first page. The signature line gleamed under the sun, my name printed bold and unwavering. I took the pen from my bag and signed. I didn't ruin their lives. I just stopped letting them script mine. The lights on the set were softer than I expected. Warm, not glaring. They framed the host's desk in a halo of amber, bathing the navy backdrop in a steady, inviting glow. I sat in the guest chair, mic clipped to my collar, palms folded calmly in my lap. It was a full house tonight. I could feel the quiet anticipation humming beneath the studio audience's polite chatter. Somewhere in the 3rd row, I saw Margot, arms crossed in her usual attorney-like posture, and beside her, Marissa, smiling as if she'd written the whole script. The host leaned forward, voice familiar and steady. Elena Harper, he said with practiced gravitas, thank you for joining us. After everything, the legal battle, the education summit, the public fallout, you're now launching your own platform for underserved youth. Tell us, how does that feel? I took a breath. The kind that comes when you know the words you're about to say won't shatter you anymore. It feels like I stepped out of someone else's story and finally picked up the pen. I replied. Soft laughter and applause rippled through the room. I let it pass before continuing. For years, I believed staying quiet was noble. That loyalty meant being invisible, especially when the people you're loyal to demand your silence as proof of your love. The host nodded thoughtfully. But you broke that silence. Yes, I said. Because silence can protect peace, but it can also protect injustice. I glanced briefly toward Margot. Her jaw tightened just enough to show pride. Marissa had tears in her eyes she didn't bother to wipe. I grew up in a home where my ideas were borrowed without credit, where speaking up was treated like betrayal. But then, Someone reminded me. I paused, hearing the words echo from memory. That even though it's late, justice is still justice. That quote had belonged to Grandma, and now it belonged to this moment. The applause was louder this time, richer. I felt the weight of it, not as validation, but as something closing behind me. A chapter, maybe, or a door. The host smiled as the clapping faded. One final question, Elena. If you could speak to yourself 10 years ago, what would you say? I let that settle inside me for a beat. 10 years ago, I was still adjusting microphones behind the stage while my sister accepted awards. 10 years ago, I still thought love could be bought with silence. I'd say, I began, speak, even if they call it betrayal. The audience stood as one. It wasn't just the clapping, it was the kind of applause that rises from the gut, grateful, raw, and a little bit stunned. I stayed seated, not out of modesty, but because I didn't need to stand to be seen anymore. Later that night, back at my apartment, I dropped my heels at the door and unbuttoned the collar of the blazer they'd insisted I wear. The city buzzed outside, lights blinking across the window pane like blinking cursor lines, daring me to write something new. As I powered up my laptop, an email notification slid onto the screen.